These are some fights from the Sword and Board tournament that I did with the PSN Discord on July 12th, 2025. Originally, my plan was to just give raw narration over the fights, but the fights moved too quickly for me to narrate move by move what's going on. Plus, I don't know enough about the game to really describe exactly what interactions are occurring at every moment. So I thought that I would just kind of give my thoughts on the experience as a whole. To start with, the build that I brought to the tournament was a very important decision that I made that led to a lot of my success, but also some of my weakness, and ultimately my loss. For starters, the armor choice that I had selected was well below the minimum or maximum requirement that we were allowed to bring. 66 poise was the limit, and I had 45. And the armor that gave me 45 points had significantly lower defenses than, say, an armor set with 66 poise. Some of the ones that I had looked at least. Furthermore, I brought a dex build with arcane-infused weapons, bleed and poison. This was an important decision because while I was fighting players who were further from me across the globe, latency played an important factor in being able to survive in a fight, being able to play around latency. Latency being the amount of time it takes for the internet to transmit information across two connections. There are these things called ghost hits, where you hit your opponent on your screen, but for some reason they're in iframes on their screen. The hit effect will occur, like the noise and the sparks or the blood or whatever, and status effects will build up, but no damage will be done. And so the poison-infused longsword allowed me to ensure that damage started to be dealt. And then furthermore, the pressure from having status effects build up incentivized my opponents to frequently back off to consume healing items called boluses. Whenever my opponent would back off to consume their healing item, I would use my projectile Ash of War, Stormblade, which would then, put pressure on them without me having to approach. And I could mix it up and rush in and try to aggress them with regular attacks with the sword. There were a total of 3 swords that I used for the fights in this tournament. 2 nearly identical swords, noble slender swords with occult infusions, 1 poison, 1 bleed, each bearing Stormblade as an Ash of War. And then 1 regalia of the Eo Cave, which is a straight sword with less range than a noble slender sword, and arguably worse damage, but it looks really cool, and it has a really cool Ash of War on it, so I couldn't help myself. Build aside, I want to say that this tournament is the most fun that I've had in Elden Ring since it came out, in Souls games since I started playing them, even. I have this thing where I talk a lot of shit about the PvE in Souls games, because from my background, it's not the hardest game I ever played. It's just the most obtuse. Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, they're all very obtuse games. You have to learn to play them. You have to learn how the stats work, you have to learn how the mechanics work, and then you have to combine those to make a build and a play style that suit one another, so that way you can even approach learning how to fight the bosses. And anything other than that would be folly. And so, from my perspective as someone who's played games with complex stats like the original Dragon Age, D&D, and games with high-impact action gameplay like Devil May Cry, the marriage of those 2 game designs into one game, Elden Ring, Dark Souls, what have you, was very intuitive for me from the start, ever since I started the series with Bloodborne. And while I didn't know all of the facts, I did not have a very hard time completing a playthrough of Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3. Elden Ring posed much more of a challenge than the other two, but still not nearly as hard as my playthrough of Devil May Cry 5. And I became very quickly bored with the PvE in this game because it didn't have a lot to offer me particularly. And that's how, I had always dabbled and enjoyed invasions and ghouls in Dark Souls 3 and in Bloodborne. And even Dark Souls 2. Not so much Dark Souls 1. I don't like a lot of mechanics in Dark Souls 1. But I quickly fell in love with duels in Elden Ring. I felt like it had everything that the bosses had to offer, but with the added benefit of spontaneity and the unknown. They say that, emergent gameplay is when your decisions impact your gameplay experience. And I feel like the most emergent gameplay is to be had in PvP in this game, because you're not playing against a hard set, series of decisions that a boss can make. You can, what is called scripting. You can script bosses in a certain sense. You can know exactly what a boss is about to do before they're about to do it. And while in PvP, if you get very good at reading your opponent, it can feel like you know exactly what they're about to do before they do it. You can never truly know because of that human factor. So, I don't think that Elden Ring is a bad game for PvE, but I do think that it's a game that I don't really enjoy for PvE, and yet I still play it nearly every day to do exactly what you're seeing here. Meet up with a bunch of other people like me who prefer to summon each other and beat the shit out of each other. Also, that was a weird interaction. The jump attack didn't stun him. I think it's because he was consuming a bolus. I think that certain frames of consume animations will give you infinite poise, because the poise limit in the tournament was designed such that you could not tank a single hit from any of the straight sword attacks without some kind of hyper armor, Ash of War, or apparently the poise from a consumable. But back to the topic of, I talk a lot of shit on the PvE. It's because I'm addicted to the PvP. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that there are very few people in this world, who truly love the game Elden Ring for all that it has to offer. Also, these next few fights I get absolutely washed. This is the round that I get kicked out of winner's bracket by Toxic SQN, also known as a beanie. But I've said before and posited that for all the game has to offer, there are so few people who actually enjoy it, because so much of the PvP community is like me. They don't get a lot out of fighting most of the bosses. They don't get a lot out of exploring the levels or doing the NPC quest lines. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone. I am definitely no monolith. I am not even a good representation of a majority of the PvP community because of my lack of experience and my lack of interaction with the community at large, I've only just begun to reach the surface of players who play the PvP in this game. There's so many. But, you know, there's people like Saint Riot, the Incognito, who like making builds, they like fighting bosses, and they like doing PvP, both invasions and duels. I just like duels and duel-adjacent combat. I don't like invasions, I don't like invading, I don't even really like being invaded all that much, although I prefer it. Not so that way I can gank, but because I know I'm more likely to get a good fight knowing that I have a good internet connection. Most invaders have a good internet connection. And knowing that most invaders have some semblance of an idea of what they're doing, whereas when you invade, there's no telling who or what you're going to go into. That's about the most emergent gameplay you can get. But it's also very terribly unbalanced and very contentious. Invasions are looked down upon because they are very asymmetrical. And people who don't know what they're talking about will say that invaders have too many advantages. People who don't know what they're talking about will say that hosts have too many advantages. Most hosts say that invasions are non-consensual because they don't want invaders coming into their world and ruining their good time. But what they don't realize is that they signed an agreement when they logged into the game. You have to literally accept the agreement to play online. You have to scroll through it and accept it before you can play. And part of that agreement is that you are going to get invaded. It's part of the game. It's the game you bought. If you don't like getting invaded, you don't like the game that you bought. Sorry about it. And so I posit that of all of my friends, none of them like Elden Ring. Well, one of them likes Elden Ring. My buddy, your boy Johnny G, friend of the pod, friend of the stream, loves Elden Ring. He loves getting invaded. He likes invading. He likes dueling me. He likes dueling randos. He likes making builds. He likes fighting bosses. His favorite is making builds, fighting bosses, and co-oping. But he likes it all. He truly likes Elden Ring. And good for him. And good for me that I have found a way to truly enjoy playing Elden Ring on my own terms. And good for anyone who finds a way to enjoy playing Elden Ring on their own terms. I have another friend who does not like Elden Ring, but loves the lore and, you know, likes making builds, but most of their builds look pretty much identical. Good fashion with a big bunga bunga, hit you hard weapon. You know, different stat spreads, different themes for the character's fashion. But other than that, very much I don't want to say ignorant to, but unconcerned with the many facets of gameplay that the game has to offer. Very uninterested in dueling, far more uninterested in invasions. We'll go so far as to disconnect. Epic backstab by Fabini right there, by the way. We'll go so far as to disconnect if an invader shows up into their world, which is against the agreement and is a form of cheating. So that's how fans of the game treat the game that they're fans of. They will go so far as to refuse to play it, to turn it off if they are faced with a mechanic that they do not like. And that baffles me. I could never. Could you imagine if I lost this duel to Fabini and I quit out of the game and forfeited the rest of the tournament, which has a loser's bracket? Like, I was not officially a loser until I got kicked out of loser's bracket by HBR. But it would be indicative of mentality that maybe the game owes me something that I'm not going to get. That I should be able to control the rules of the game so that things that I don't like don't happen. And to that I say, that's not a game. That's an application, that's a program. It's a means of having fun, I guess you could say, but a game isn't simply a means of having fun, because then masturbation would be a game, I guess. Games are rule sets around an activity. Perfect vlog. Games are rule sets around an activity that define conditions for how to participate in the activity for the purpose of having fun. And the agreement that you sign at the start of Elden Ring is laying out the rule sets so that everyone can be in agreement. But no one likes this game. They like the world it takes place in. They like the themes. They like the looks. They like the feeling of success when they win at something, when they beat a boss or a very difficult enemy encounter. But they don't like losing. And, you know, some might say, why would anyone like losing? Well, for starters, it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to improve. And I think that most players don't like improving at the game. My one friend who even likes this game, your boy Johnny G, I don't think likes improving at the game, because very rarely does he adjust his game plan to allow for improvement. There you saw HBR swing out of hit stun because I did not have a frame advantage to prevent him from doing so, and I was one shot. Bad decision on my part. I, for one, am very concerned with him. It's pretty much the only reason I play. And I think that it should be the number one concern of anyone who logs into this game ever. Of course, that's just my opinion. But if you disagree with it, go truly ask yourself, what is the point of participating in any activity if you have no intention of improving at it? Even Usain Bolt, the fastest man alive, pushes himself to run as fast as he can, to run faster. Maybe he's not the fastest man alive anymore. I don't keep up with Olympic sports, or sports in general. But the greatest players in Elden Ring, the Stilovskis and the G9s, concern themselves with improving, continue to study the game, continue to stay up to date on mechanics and setups and techniques that can improve their gameplay. Or even if they don't plan on implementing techniques to improve their gameplay, knowing the techniques that their opponent could be implementing so that way they can know how to counter them. There you see another running R2 into Stormblade roll catch. It's a natural roll catch. Very consistent. In G9, I posit doesn't like this game. Distortion 2, the speedrunners hate this game. I don't know why they keep playing it other than it makes them money. Speedrunners only ever complain about the game. Most challenge runners only ever complain about the game because the game is very obtuse and it's not fair. The words challenging but fair have been frequently thrown around to describe this game, and the only time I've ever felt like it was fair was PvP, because my opponent has access to exactly the same mechanics as me. If they can parry me, I can parry them. To an extent, you know, there's setups that are literally unparryable. 2-hit colossal weapons cannot be parried. Certain Ashes of War cannot be parried. But regardless, we can backstab each other. Melania cannot be backstabbed, which I feel like is a design flaw. I feel like the way her fight is paced, she should be backstabbable. Sister Freed was, and it was one of the greatest fights ever in the Souls franchise. But PvE will throw mechanics at you that are inescapable. instant kills. Waterfowl Dance is not fair. Destined Death is not fair. Waterfowl Dance is very trivial once you learn how to mitigate it. Once you learn how to survive Waterfowl Dance, it becomes a non-issue. I would say that Melania's most problematic move is rather that one where she dashes in and swings her sword 3 times in quick succession and then follows up with a larger swing. I call it the juice box because she gets so much HP back off of it. It's like she drinks a little juice box and it comes out so quick. And you can stun her out of it if you swing first with a frame advantage. HBR using the terrain to his advantage to avoid my Stormblade, very smart on his part. Destined Death, Malekith is a very easy fight if you know how to avoid all of his attacks. There's only the one that you can get trapped in, and it doesn't one-shot, so I guess you could say he's fair, but challenging. But until you have those knowledge checkpoints, I feel like a game that is challenging but fair should be capable of being beaten on the first try. You should be able to technically be able to achieve a deathless run the very first time you play through a challenging but fair game. It should, like Mario, is challenging but fair. It introduces you to all the mechanics in a staggered way that allows you to familiarize yourself with them as you are being forced to use them. You're very well tutorialized in Mario, but the challenges do not stop. And it's very fair. Elden Ring does not do that. Dark Souls does not do that. It doesn't need to do that. It doesn't need to be challenging but fair. It's bullshit. It's life. It's not supposed to be fair. It's art. It is what it is. It's beautiful. But it's something that most people won't accept. And it's not what most people say it is. And neither is the PvP. People joke that Elden Ring PvP will never be at EVO. And I think that that's a shame. I think it has a lot to offer. But first of all, there needs to be a community that spectates. Because right now, the only people who spectate Elden Ring PvP are participants in Elden Ring PvP. And that is also a shame. Oh well. At least I have something I can love. You know? It's important to have hobbies. Until next time, y'all have a good day. Be safe.